I think a lot of people remember Jessie as the quirky kids show about the nanny dealing with the four kids. That or they remember the late Cameron Boyce was on the show. Me personally, I did grow up with the show, but my memories of it are a bit scant. Did it age well? Did it age poorly? And more importantly, is it still funny? Let's dig into the Jessie episode Trashin' Fashion. We open with Emma and her friend Rosie. Rosie is the poor girl who is friends with the rich girl, sort of like your Maddie to the London Tipton, though Rosie is a bit more edgy. Speaking of London Tipton, we hear one of the fashion brands, Arturo Vitale. Disney Channel has this thing where they just have shared universes, which really is just for crossover purposes, nothing more, nothing less, and a lot of convoluted retcons that I am not qualified to handle. This is Emma Ross, the oldest of Morgan and Christina Ross's children and the only biological child of the two. A recurring element is that she has this web show called Kitty Couture, and this was in 2012, I believe it aired. I'm sure that YouTube ad revenue was far better back then. Anyways, she's basically a fashion vlogger. I wonder how much money she gets if she was an unboxer before those got really popular. Basically, Emma wants to keep her Kitty Couture identity a secret because she doesn't want people to focus on her famous parents and write off that fame. I can totally respect this. I'm glad she didn't buy her subscribers, even though she seems to be more of a streamer. Though, word of advice, Emma, don't show off your balcony. The internet managed to dox the Lofi Beats girl because she showed off what was outside her window, and she's a cartoon character. Even hiding it from Jessie. Now, I normally would be annoyed at these things when they're hiding details from parents and guardians and secret identities and such, especially when it comes to the tax man, but hey, kids watching the show don't want to do taxes, they want to get famous and vicariously live through them. The plot of this episode involves Christina Ross, the kid's mother, coming by and promoting her new brand, clothes inspired by the 80s. Jessie insults this by saying the 80s were the most hideous era of fashion. Oh, Jessie, if only you knew how hard nostalgia would hit. Christina basically wants her kids to model, but Emma and Zuri opt out. Emma obviously has her fashion channel and wouldn't be caught dead in the 80s clothes. Meanwhile, Zuri doesn't want to model because her last modeling job ended up with her as a giant pepperoni and she never saw a dime. Now, let's talk about the issues with the kids. Zuri here is meant to play two roles, the cutesy one and the one who is wise beyond her age. It's not atypical of Disney Channel shows. The problem tends to be when the actors and the characters age, the cutesy part gets played down, and the wise beyond their age part gets played up. In Zuri's case, the obsession with getting money, to the point of extorting or scamming people, and her vanity get played up. It's a lot less cute when they age into that role. I think the shift happens towards season 3, but it could happen earlier, but right now, she is playing the cutesy one pretty well. Ravi is another character I remember strongly disliking. I remember an Indian kid at my school commenting on how his accent sounds absurdly fake, and he also said, at least Baljit can sing, which is probably the biggest slap in the face that this character has ever dealt with. Ravi as a character is meant to play the funny foreigner loser nerd with a lizard named after Rudyard Kipling. Yes, that Rudyard Kipling. He's just a walking collection of stereotypes. And as with many nerdy Disney Channel characters, their intellect will give them a major superiority complex in later episodes, and Ravi is no exception. I honestly liked Ravi in earlier seasons rather than later ones. While the funny foreigner aspect is played up, at least he has a spine here and isn't too much of a jerk. I honestly don't have a problem with Luke besides the grossness and immaturity being played up in later seasons. I think Cameron Boyce being charismatic actually helps alleviate this, but honestly, sometimes the immaturity is so off base that it just comes off as just creepy. But hey, he's still like 13 in this episode, so it's fine. Same problem happens with Emma. Her stupidity is played up in later seasons, and her mean and judgmental nature is also played up. Then again, this is what happens when you have characters age, but you don't exactly have them tell new jokes. Okay, let's get back to the plot. Jessie is relegated to assistant duty for Christina Ross. Emma feels pretty annoyed at how, a teen clothing line is being designed without her, given that, she's a teenager, which has an interesting hook for the episode. Christina, however, is shown to be an absolute ass to Jessie, forcing her to wear a dog collar that tracks her movements. Emma thinks the designs for Christina's line are ugly as sin, but given how her nanny just got a dog collar put on her, she's not willing to put up with this just yet. We get an editing issue with the collar. You see, the collar emits a piercing sound that causes Jessie to fall over. The problem is that there's a delay in the cut where Debbie Ryan stumbles. It's pretty obvious that the mistake happens because Debbie covers her ear in pain and stumbles after the sound has already occurred, not during the sound. We cut to Bertram, who takes over nanny duties to try to teach Zuri how to ride a bike. Bertram can't ride a bike, having childhood trauma of eating dirt while riding one made him swear off riding one. Zuri opts to learn the hard way how to ride the bike so she can teach Bertram. Meanwhile, Luke and Ravi's subplot involves them fighting over who gets to walk supermodel Diamond Bloodworth down the runway because of course Christina would spend money on a famous model, something Luke didn't figure out because he's an idiot, despite being the one most important thing that using kids as models as a cost-cutting measure doesn't exactly mean that, they're not going to have any professional models at all. Then again, Ravi didn't figure this out, so he's kinda stupid. Meanwhile, Emma's attempt at trying to tell her mom that her fashion show is going to be a fashion disaster doesn't work. With Zuri and Bertram, Emma's bike is the only other bike they have. Emma never struck me as the type of person to ride a bike at all. Zuri's attempt to teach him how to ride a bike are initially successful before she spots a penny and ends up having Bertram crash into some swans. Meanwhile, Rosie strong-arms Emma into going into her mom's fashion show and trashing it. After some antics where Christina abuses Jessie to the point she bleeds out, not on screen, of course, we instead get the joke that blood and the dress are red, we find out that Kitty Couture is going to be at the show. Christina decides to polygraph her office staff and begin terminating them. This joke was probably funny at the time, but given how much abusing staff has come out, especially with recent revelations about child actors in Hollywood and writers as well, this joke suddenly becomes a bit harsher in hindsight. Zuri's attempt to get Bertram to go on the tandem bike in order to go to the fashion show. She's successful. At the fashion show, Ravi looks like a Thriller reject while Luke is in a suit. Basically, Ravi chose the outfit that had the hardest degree of modeling, while Luke did the mundane thing of just asking what outfit walks Diamond down the runway. Obviously, Emma is going to try to toe a neutral line between bashing her mother's fashion show and feeding the audience what she wants. Well, what they wanted and she cultivated. The humor comes from is just how Peyton List delivers all of these backhanded compliments. The hesitation is funny in and of itself. We cut to the obvious green screen where Zuri road raging honestly is a lot funnier than it has any right to be. Luke is about to go out, but Luke has a thread hanging which Jessie grabs. The dress Diamond wears is so hideous that even Emma struggles to spin it in a good direction. Then it happens. Luke's pants drop, much to his horror. And honestly, this face is the whole reason why I made this video, because it's such a great thumbnail material. And Jessie has a full hand of thread. At some point you should have just let go. Emma tries to spin this as the audience laughing with delight, and honestly, after the train wreck of a fashion show, can you blame them? Because Emma is trying to say, oh, this is a great way to debut a new underwear line. I'm not sure if underwear is copyrighted, but I am pretty sure if that's the case, someone's getting sued. Obviously, Luke is looking quite constipated at all of this, so basically Ravi has to bail out the show dressed like a dork. The cringe is funny. Meanwhile, Luke has adopted the death grip on Diamond's arm out of humiliation, and Ravi ends up breaking it. Now, Luke has transferred the death grip to the floor of the runway. Diamond quits because this was humiliating for her. Christina Ross wins Mother of the Year by being an absolute ass by telling her son to let go of the runway. He's in his underwear on the floor of a runway. I think your first instinct should have been to cover him up. They do eventually cover him up. Obviously, Jessie ends up taking Diamond's role and ends up tumbling off the stage. Oh, and Luke has been bobbing his head left and right, so basically the tarp has moved and only half of him is covered by now. Christina finds out that Emma is Kitty Couture and claims there to trash the show right before Bertram and Zuri destroy the tents. In the end, Emma and her mother reconcile, with Emma being named as a consultant. Happy end, unless your name is Luke. Love how they had to put him on a furniture dolly and a piece of the runway as well. Obviously, he won't budge. And in the end, Bertram learns how to ride a stationary bike. Sorta. This episode generally holds up well. I tend to be annoyed at Ravi, but I found him bearable in this. And while I think him coming on top of the whole fashion show ordeal is bad, this whole thing has been a disaster, so, well, let's be honest, with what these three are wearing, there are zero winners. Personally, wasn't a fan of torturing Jessie throughout the episode. Reducing her to a chew toy is less funny and more off-putting. And by extension, this makes Christina Ross come off as an abusive, mad, power lunatic. But her fashion show ended in catastrophe, her designs ended in catastrophe as well, and her tent got destroyed, so I think that this is proportionate retribution for all the crap she put Jessie through. And trust me, tents are more expensive than you think. Personally, I wouldn't have ended with Luke's scene with Jessie trying to scrape him off. I would have had Zuri and Bertram ram him with a bike so that they would have removed him. That's funnier because my mind is oriented towards nonsensical slapstick. Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.